Medusa. Let you look at that for a second. Alright, the raft of the Medusa. Let's go down our list. Is this concrete or abstract? I think just about everybody would say that this is concrete, right? Because you can readily associate everything that's going on with a frame of reference, right? With something that you've seen or something that you're supposed to recognize. Alright? What about tension or release? I think we obviously get a feeling of tension. You've got the waves moving on. You've obviously got wind blowing and just tension going on there. What about consonant or dissonant? Again, here you get a kind of a mixed bag, because from a colors standpoint, all the colors are kind of in the same hue range. So it's not really dissonant or harsh in the sense it's from colors. But when you begin to look at the subject matter, and you begin to look at the fact that you're looking at a whole bunch of dead bodies down here to the lower left and things of that nature, that could be a little bit dissonant, right? What about open or closed? I think most people probably agree that this is on the open side. You could make an argument for closed, but I'm thinking open for me, because if you don't even get to see the whole raft, this body that's in the lower right hand corner is like, where's the rest of it? Is it there? You know, just what's going on. All right. Tell you a little bit about this particular painting. The Raft of the Medusa by Theodore Géricault, and he lived from 1791 to 1824, illustrates a criticism of social institutions in general. So this painting is social commentary. All right. The painting tells a story of a governmental incompetence that resulted in tragedy. In 1816, the French government allowed an unseaworthy ship, the Medusa, to leave port, and it was wrecked. Aboard a makeshift raft, the survivors endured tremendous suffering and were eventually driven to cannibalism. So now that gives you a little bit different perspective. Now let's look at these bodies in the lower right-hand corner and see what you make of that. Alright, and in the lower, just look at the bodies, the dead bodies. Alright. In preparing for the work, Géricault interviewed the survivors, read newspaper accounts, and went so far as to paint the corpses and heads of guillotined criminals. So he did his research so he could really get the horror of it all. By the way, this painting was completed in 1819. The event took place in 1816. So he did his research, and you know that seems like a long time by our standards, but again, you're talking about a huge painting. This painting is 16 feet by 23 feet 6 inches. So this is just about as big, and I'm looking in my office, as one of the walls in my office, and a little bit taller, because the ceiling of my office is only up to about 10 feet. So this is a huge, huge painting. Imagine the impact of seeing these bodies. And now, by the way, let's kind of do the math real quick right here. This thing is 16 feet tall. The average man is about, let's even give him the average man 6 feet. So as I look at this figure that's standing up here, and I get about 1, 2, and not 2 1/3 of him, divide 16, that's 8. So that's almost life size. That's almost life size. And so that would mean that all these figures are life size. So here you are on a wall, or looking at a painting on the wall, staring at life size dead people. Just imagine what that impact would be like. Pretty impactful, right? Okay. Géricault's painting captures the ordeal of the event in romantic style, tempered by classical and even high Renaissance influences. He creates firmly modeled flesh, lifelike figures, and a precise play of light and shade. Okay, as you can see, everything on this painting is right where it's supposed to be. Where there's supposed to be shade, there's shade. Seems like most of the places. Where there's supposed to be light, there's light. Right? Okay. In contrast to other paintings of the time, which express classical tendencies and hence two-dimensionality and order, all right, and classical is an era. We'll talk more about that later. But this, as I said, is more romantic in style. And hence two-dimensionality and order, okay? Zeriko used a complex and fragmented compositional structure. Now you're probably saying compositional structure. Well, here's the thing. He didn't just paint bodies up there. He's trying to get balance and symmetry. If you look at it, well, let's go a little further in this. He chose to base the design on two triangles rather than on one strong central triangle. If you look at it, the Raft of the Medusa, the left triangle's apex is the makeshift mast, which points back towards despair and death. The other triangle moves up to the right to the figure waving the fabric, pointing towards hope and life as a rescue ship appears in the distance. Now, if you look, alright, if you look at the guy that has the rag, the red rag, look below his hand to the person with the white rag. Now follow that person's elbow, go right below the elbow, you'll see a little speck of something that is actually a ship in the distance. Now, it doesn't look like a lot on your screen right now, but remember, this painting is 23 feet by 16 feet tall, so it would be noticeable on that. And again, as we've talked about, venue has a lot to do with how you're able to encounter and interact with an artwork. You have to consider all of that when you're analyzing something, when you're looking at something, and what the impact would have been had you seen this in its original format, which would be a painting. Okay? Zeriko captures the moment that a potential rescue ship is sighted and sails on by. The play of light and shade heightens the dramatic effect, and the composition builds upward from the bodies of the dead and dying in the foreground to the dynamic group whose final energies are summoned to support the figure waving to the ship. Okay? Thus, the painting surges with unbridled emotional response to the horror of the experience and the heroism of the survivors. It is hope followed by despair. And of course, anybody from that time period in France would have known the story of what happened, and they would have been able to invest all of that in there. It's almost kind of like, you know, if you saw Flight 93 or 193, whatever it was, dealing with 9/11, just because we live in that time period, it means a lot more to us than somebody that either isn't American or somebody that lived, 20, 30, 40 years from now. I don't know what the state of the world will be, but if things are calmed down and a lot more peaceful, it's going to be hard for people to access what it was like to have lived in these times while the war is going on and all those kinds of things. I mean, I don't know if you realize we've been at war for 10 years. 10 years. That's a pretty long time. Okay? Alright, so that's the Raft of the Medusa. Okay. Woman in Mirror. Pablo Picasso. Probably one artist that most people recognize. Let's run it down. Consonant or dissonant? I'm thinking most people would probably say dissonant. Concrete or abstract? Well, it is concrete in the respect that you can recognize what everything is, but is it close to how you would expect to recognize it or see it? No. I think most people call this an abstract painting. There are more abstract paintings. For instance, the Pollock that we looked at, number one, the one with all the paint splatters, as it were, that one was a lot more abstract, but this has a certain abstract quality about it. Okay? Alright, what about tension or release? I think people could argue either way about whether this was tension or release. Consonant or dissonant? I think a lot of people might say, I think we already said that this might be dissonant. Now, here's a thing where a lot of times you can separate the composition from subject matter, just like we said in some of the other paintings, because the subject matter is relatively consonant, but the manner in which it's presented might be dissonant. Okay? Alright. What about symmetry? Do we have symmetry here? I think everybody can kind of see that it's kind of split down the middle. You have the woman on one side, then you have the reflection on the other, in the mirror. Okay? What about open or closed? This would be a closed composition because the attention is between the woman looking at herself in the mirror, and that's kind of where it stays. You don't really think about, even though you're aware of the fact that there's a wall back there, it's not really an important thing. It's kind of secondary to all of this. Another concept that we see here is juxtaposition. What is juxtaposition? That just simply means putting two things next to each other. The juxtaposition of colors and the boldness of the colors in this painting, and also the juxtaposition of angular shapes next to curved lines and shapes, give this the feeling of tension that it does have and the feeling of dissonance that it does have. Again, there's things that you could argue both ways as far as tension and release, or dissonant and consonant, and those things. But as we break it down further, we start to see what is it about the painting that gives us one feeling or the other. All right. What are we looking at? It says woman in mirror, and we notice that there's actually three types of images here. We have the woman, and the woman herself is split into two images. And then we have the mirror that has its image. And all three of them, you could sit and talk about all three of those sides of face that you see, the two that are on the actual woman and the one that's in the mirror as well. I mean, we could be looking at that the woman that's there that we see on the left-hand side of the real face is actually what she is, and maybe she considers herself, you know, the other side of her face, and maybe she feels like the world sees her as what's in the mirror. I mean, there's any combination of things that you could get out of that. Now, another thing that you have to consider when you're looking at an artwork, or when you're encountering an artwork, and we're talking about visual art right now, but it also applies for music and drama and movies and anything else, is what is your frame of mind at the time you encounter the artwork? What do we mean by that? Let's say that you see a movie that has divorce in it. Well, if you just broke up with somebody, you're going to tend to identify with one of the one side or the other based on the characteristics there. Like if you feel like you were right or they were wrong, or there's a whole lot of things that could enter in there, but I think you get my point, that you'll identify with stronger with one or the other because you just went through a breakup. Or if you're looking at something that has to do with a sporting event, you know, and you're training for something, it might have a different look for you. Or I don't know, you could be, imagine how, there was a movie called Bright Lights Big City. It was with Michael J. Fox, and he was, I think it was cocaine that he was addicted to, and he was trying to pull his life together, and he was trying to work, and all these kinds of things. And imagine what seeing a movie like that would be if you were going through a drug addiction problem. It could drive you over the edge, or it could pull you back from the edge. It just depends on how you react to it, but your present state of mind when you encounter the artwork has a lot to do with what your reaction is. And that's another reason that people come back to revisit artworks, because the artwork itself may not change, but we change. And how we perceive it and how we receive it on a certain day, based on what was going on that day, can give us a different perspective on it, or a different enjoyment out of it, and things of that nature. All right? Do we have repetition in this painting? Yes, we've got the diamonds, we've got a lot of circles, lots of circles all over. We have the woman's belly, what is that? Looks like her shoulder, her breast, everything. We've got all kinds of circles going on, the face, the mirror itself is an oval. There's a lot of ovals, a lot of circles in here. Even inside the diamonds, there's ovals or circles, all right? We've got a lot of repetition of color. We've got a repetition of the concept of a stripe, and as I already mentioned, we have juxtapositioning of different forms, different shapes, different colors, and all of that. All right, are you kind of getting the hang of how you can look at a painting and get more out of it? That's not just did it speak to you, or what are they trying to say is, what did the artist use? How skillfully did they manipulate the elements? What techniques did they use to evoke certain feelings? I mean, for me, a lot of times when I deal with artwork, I don't really want to deal with it from a technical aspect first. I kind of want to just look at it, experience it, and then I want to go back and see, now, how did they get to this point? How did they get me to feel like this, and all, or think like that, and all those kinds of things. All right? And you can actually see in the upper left-hand corner Picasso's signature, and that he painted this in 1932, right? Or maybe he was 32 years old. One of the two. I think it was painted in 1932, however. All right, moving on.